Welcome to the Storypowers podcast, the show about the power of stories, the people who tell them, and why you should be doing it too. I'm your host, keynote speaker and storytelling coach, Francisco Mahfuz. My guest today is Amy Blaschka. Amy is a social media ghostwriter who helps leaders craft their stories to communicate and connect better. She has made a career offering stories as a service and has spent 3 decades branding products, places, and people. As a longtime leadership contributor for Forbes, she also covers personal transformation and its impact on career growth. On top of all that, Amy has the rare distinction of having a coffee drink named after her. Ladies and gentlemen, here's my conversation with the amazing Amy Blaschka. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Francisco. Yes, I have that is, I don't think I've ever had an introduction mention that little bit, which is so much a part of me. And it's funny because even though this is all audio, you can see I am holding that said coffee drink in my hand right now.
You are indeed, but do you want to explain to me what, because I understand it's a latte, right? But was it the Amy latte, the Blaschka latte? Or?
So it's an almond milk latte, but It has cinnamon powder steamed into the almond milk. Rather than just sprinkle cinnamon on top. One of the baristas, the coffee shop that I frequent, it's a chain, but it's called Peet's, Peet''S. It's based here in California. And every morning, it's sort of my ritual. I get up and I put my dog in my car, and Rigby, he comes with me, and we'll go to the Peet's. And I had been ordering this drink. I think I'd started with regular milk, and then I'd switched over to almond milk. I was trying something different. And the barista at the time, the manager, he said, I noticed that you sprinkle cinnamon on top of your latte. We can steam it in, and it's kind of nice because it just infuses it through. I said, oh, great. And I loved it. And it's really good that way. For anyone listening, you should try that. But because I'm there literally every day, and when you order a drink, you have to say, oh, I want this, I want, this way and this way. And can you steam the cinnamon in for me? And I was there enough that everybody working there, you don't need to tell us. I'm like, oh, you should just have an Amy button on your register. And I said, yeah, we just refer to it right now as the Amy. So, even when we're telling each other, we just say, oh, it's just the Amy. Instead of typing in, please, steam in cinnamon and make it on, they'll just say the Amy. So they said, we call it that. And somebody overheard you ordering another customer. And they said, well, what is that drink? They said, well, that's the Amy. Well, I want the Amy too. So it's not on their board. I guess that you would call it, a secret menu. But if somebody asks for the Amy, then everybody there knows exactly what the drink is. So, so that's kind of fun.
You could consider that the next step would be getting on the board, but perhaps there's a secret charm to it. This is the real test. If you ever went to another Peet's and said, I would like the Amy, and they said, oh, yes, of course, the Amy.
That's right. I should try that. Yeah. Well, unfortunately now, of course, all the ordering is done via mobile app. So there's no way for me to tag it in there. But when we are past this period of isolation and, I can actually maybe frequent another Peet's, I will certainly try that. That would be a fun test. And what if they did? What if they're like, oh, of course, it's you, Amy? It's like a code word. But yeah, it's great. So it's
delicious. I live in Spain, and I don't know if you've ever tried having coffee in Spain. I mean, and they have the regular types of coffee. But when I moved here from England, I was baffled about the variety of orders because Spanish people are very peculiar about many things. But when it comes to coffee, so you can have coffee from the machine, which is how most people have it in a coffee shop. But you can have filter coffee. You can have instant coffee. People will order instant coffee. So there's 3 variables there for you. Then you have all the variations you can have with milk, like normal milk, steamed milk, or whatever. Now you have all the different types of milk. Then you have the ratios. So, you have a latte, you have a white coffee, and then they have, what is the one that I love the name? There's one they called the manchado, which is the stained. So it's just milk with a little bit of coffee. But they could order. Yeah, so they'll say a black coffee, a stained coffee, but a little stained or very stained.
Yes, the degree of stain.
I mean, if you just put all the variables in. I mean, I mean, they're not baristas really, because it's a pretty straightforward process. But you're talking about maybe hundreds of variations of the stuff. It's just crazy.
It's funny. It's so customizable, and people are very serious. I mean, about their coffees here. It's so funny. My husband is like black coffee. He's very simple. Although he's very finicky too, because he'll say, "Well, I can taste the difference between just that plain black. I like the dark roast. I prefer an African pea berry versus a blend of other stuff, Costa Rica." So I think people, I don't know. It's one of those. I think it was something that was very much a commodity and sort of whatever before, and now it has become this sort of extension of yourself, of your personality, of your brand, of your, sort of like, well, for me, I mean, yeah, the Amy, but it gets to the thing, and I guess for me, the coffee now, getting that drink, it is part of my daily ritual. So it is more than just I'm going to have a cup of coffee. For me, that even the first sip signals, okay, it's time to sit down and get to work, because that, for me, that's when I do my creative work best, is in the mornings. And when I have that latte in my hand or next to me, next to my laptop, it's like that. It's something that cue of taking that sip and sort of, okay, now is the time. And that having that taste in my mouth linger tells my brain, okay, it's time to get to work, Amy. So, it's funny how we attribute so much to coffee and how it becomes part of our lives, and how it can be so customizable and personable, right? So it's, and how do you take your coffee? I didn't even ask.
I'm a fan of what here is called an Americano.
Yes,
American
espresso with the hot, yeah.
No. The American, or the Americano, is the super watered down. Well, it's a filter coffee, right? It was like a watered down filter coffee. So if they ever decide to water that even further, so that you can drink about 5 mugs a day, and call that the Francisco, I think that would be fine.
That's so funny. Okay, well, I think you should start something there. Why not?
Yes. Right. So let's bring me back from this massive digression.
That's what happens. Two storytellers, like, oh.
One thing, I think on the same interview that I heard you talk about the latte that had your name on it, you also talked about one of your previous jobs that you said in theory has nothing to do with storytelling, but actually had quite a lot to do, which is at a travel agency.
It wasn't a travel agency, so it's I worked in travel and tourism. I was the CEO of what's called the Destination Marketing Organization. So it is, you are tasked with marketing a destination and bringing visitors in, right, and ensuring they have a great experience. And so you work with hospitality partners like hotels and restaurants and attractions, that sort of thing. Yeah, so it is a funny, like, what? Why did you? I mean, I came from sort of agency land and branding and everything, and kind of just fell into tourism. But the thing, there are a couple common threads that I think now it makes sense. At the time, everyone's like, what are you doing? And practically at that time in my life, my husband and I had just had our first of 2 daughters. And prior, I had been commuting in. I live outside of San Francisco by about 30 miles. I've been commuting into San Francisco and traveling all over the country for my branding clients. And I loved it, but it wasn't very practical once we had a child. The commute, or even just the travel schedule that involved with seeing clients all over the place. So
is anything very practical when you have children?
Well, I mean, versus having a job that was closer, didn't have the commute, or not having the travel schedule, or I had to be on a plane and do all these things. So the answer is no, there's nothing convenient.
Keep in mind that if I'm recording this from inside what I call the fortress of pillows, which is my daughter's room, surrounded by pillows, and I always have to remember before I start recording to take her pajamas hang just behind me. And first I recorded, I was like, "What is that hanging behind you? Is that underwear?" I was like, child's pajamas, but you're close enough.
Oh, that's funny. Yes,
So
yes.
nothing very practical. Yes. Right. So you did you go then when you went to the destination marketing company?
Yes. So I had been home with our oldest daughter, like being a stay-at-home mom, which nobody thought I could do, for a little over a year. And I was like, okay, it's time for both of us to talk to people our own age. And I started looking around, knowing I didn't want to have to commute again. I didn't want to have the travel schedule. And a friend of mine had said, hey, you should interview for this thing. They call it a CVB, a Convention and Visitors Bureau. They're looking for a new CEO. And I'm like, I've never worked in tourism. What do you? But I thought, you know what? It has been forever since I've interviewed or done anything. It's probably good practice to so I kind of threw my name in the hat, not expecting much. Well, I got called for an interview and I got called, ended up in the final two, and I was presenting to their board of directors because it's a nonprofit entity that these typically are. And it just worked. And they offered me the position, and I took a leap of faith, which is kind of been a theme for me too. It's sort of following kind of a curiosity and, what could I do? But the idea there, and the reason that it makes sense, is because I had come from a branding background where it was all about kind of shining a light on the best attributes of, prior to that, it was, Coca-Cola or Sauza Tequila. So it was product based. But now, instead of, a can of soda, what I was trying to promote in a way and tell a story about it and invite people in was a destination. And I love that. So there was that common thread, and I love people. I love working collaboratively, and the people that work in hospitality and tourism are people. Most people are, they should be, because they're interfacing with other folks and they want to provide a service. They want to have an exceptional experience. And so people of that mindset, they're very much about serving others and ensuring that great experience. That's what made up the bulk of the people I was interfacing with, or visitors and community members, that sort of thing. And I stayed there for just under 10 years in that role, which I never thought I would. I'm like, what? And it was great because I had a chance to build and tell the story of that destination and meet others in sort of similar things. And I love traveling, and so does my husband. So it gives an opportunity to kind of do more of that with friends in the industry and to kind of have other greater experiences. So yeah, it seemed like a detour, but that was just another stepping stone in sort of that storytelling sort of thread that runs through my entire career experience.
When you were telling stories for a destination, what shape did those stories usually take? Because I think we exposed a lot to the sort of one-liners, nice picture, one-liner, and that's that. Were you able to do a lot more than that?
I mean, yes and no. So you have sort of vehicles like your website, you have, ads that you're doing, whether they are print ad or they're radio ad or all these different mix of communications. And then if you are running that company and you become that spokesperson locally whenever you're traveling through an industry. So you become that brand too, much like a CEO of any other company kind of speaks and is sort of a figurehead for that too. So when I had a chance to speak about my destination, I was able to tell the story there and kind of, its roots and so yes, it's not as, it's not exactly the same as something like Coca-Cola or even a person, but the fundamentals of trying to attract others through the vehicle of storytelling, less about a hard sell and, trying to push something down somebody's throat, and rather that kind of pull strategy, right, of making it very enticing and intriguing and wanting someone to come and visit because it's like, oh, that sounds wonderful, or that resonates with me. Wow, that sounds like me, or I really like that. What she said, or what they said about this area. So it's kind of a little of both. There's only so much you can do. It wasn't just like we came up with a tagline and we did this. And it's like most things, it's not just a one and done. It's kind of continually, and it kind of evolves over time, and it's through multiple mediums and methods. So
I think that the destination marketing industry is going to go through a very simple period once we're able to travel again, because I assume most advertising for destination is going to be visit Venezuela because you can.
Because you can. That now, I mean, what's happening here is that nobody's really flying or anything, but what's popular now is RVs, recreational vehicles that people are like our neighbor is just doing this now with a family, like 5 RVs, and they're just traveling down the California coast because they can. That's all they can do. Or, just if if anybody has like a second home, like on a lake, or even if it's meager cabin, something, at least it feels like you're getting away. So,
you are. And I think this is the most attractive destination of all. Anywhere that's not your house. Because
exactly
it's
right.
out of the house is the other, because you can, because it's not your house that's
Oh
the
my
marketing
God.
that's going to be gold for at least 6 months until people, okay, fine, we get it. COVID is gone, or mostly gone. We can go back to normal
Oh,
communication. You say yourself that you offer stories as a service. Right. So, and I know a lot of that is to do with ghostwriting. So the question I have for you is, why is ghostwriting not cheating?
well, at least the way I do it, it is not cheating. So when I work with leaders and I ghostwrite for them, my goal is to make sure that whatever we write together, it sounds like them, because it is 95% of it is it's their words, it's their phrasing, it's their cadence. So when we talk, a huge part of what I do, and probably my best skill in terms of ghostwriting and writing in general, is listening. Because I can write anything. I could write something for you and you could put your name on it, but it's not going to, it wouldn't sound like you unless we had a conversation and I'm taking copious notes on, okay, Francisco says this is how he likes to say it, and the order and how he strings together sentences. Is he someone that is very staccato and uses short little things? I have some clients like that, are very direct and like boom, boom, boom. Or is it a little bit more flowy? Is it this? Is it that? So it needs to be about that client. It needs to be in their voice. It needs to be, in their tone. It needs to be reflective of who they are as a leader, what matters most to them, their perspective, their unique point of view. I think, anyone that is successful doesn't get there alone. They have a team of people that they work with and experts in what they do and helping them get along. So it's not that they paid me to write something that they had nothing to do with. It's all of their ideas. It's all of their insights. It's just me helping them draw it out, rearrange it, put it together in a way and deliver it back to them. And, if there's any reason that they read something I write and they're like, I would never say that, or I would change this word, there was an opportunity to edit before. It's not just a blind thing that they suddenly posted. But it's a partnership. It really is. And it's based on true conversation. And the longer that we work together, the easier it gets for both of us. So not cheating.
I was obviously just trying to mess with you, but I do like that you could actually have a tagline somewhere that says, "With me, it's not cheating."
Well, I understand where that comes from, that sentiment, because most people, when you say ghostwriting, they go to a book, right? The ghostwritten books. That's their experience. Most people are like, what's a social media ghostwriter? What is that? So they assume it's the same process, but it's a little different. And I don't blame them, but I've been asked this before, so it's fine. I have no problem kind of lifting the curtain sort of on the process and experience, but it's okay. You're not messing with me. That's a legitimate question to ask, and people ask it all the time. So no problem.
Well, something else I wanted to know, and I think I've heard you say this, but I wanted to double check. So, the examples you used there were a very specific post or an article, but is something you do as well helping them figure out or write their story?
Yes. So I'm a social media ghostwriter, but the other side of my business that has picked up tremendously, but actually evolved from the ghostwriting, is this. I call it a career story package. So my social media ghostwriting is a monthly retainer. So this is a long-term program that we work on together over time. But what happens in the best of all possible worlds as a working, social media ghostwriting is the client is posting consistently. They have consistency and discipline in posting about those 1, 2, 3 topics where they are experts. So this is all about their thought leadership. And they're doing it on a consistent basis. And their audience comes to expect that. And they like that and they engage with it. And naturally, when you read something from someone that you like, oh, that's really interesting, you pique their interest, they click over, because most of my clients, their primary platform on social media is LinkedIn. They will click over to their profile and they'll want to know more, right? And a lot of my clients had incomplete or old profiles, or The problem was it didn't align. What they were putting out content-wise did not align with sort of the way they were presenting and positioning themselves through their story through LinkedIn and their profile. So I came up with a program or a project where I have 4 parts and call it your career story, where I will work with them and do a deep dive, like an hour call with them. And we uncover sort of where they are now versus where they want to be. Because ideally you want everything to connect and align and support each other. Somebody reads something about you, they shouldn't scratch their heads if they've just read a piece of content you put out and then they go to your profile and it's completely like that's incongruent. What's happening? Who is this person really? You want to make it easy for someone to quickly understand who you are, what you're about, who you serve, why you, what differentiates you. So the first piece I do, I call the backstory, and this can apply to your LinkedIn about or summary, or a lot of my clients are founders and they have their own companies, and it can also be part of their about section about them. It's really, that is sort of the bulk of telling a narrative about who they are in that about section. A lot of folks on LinkedIn neglect that prime real estate. It's there for a reason. I mean, we all have the experience section on LinkedIn, which it functions like a resume, right? It's a chronological listing of your current and past experience, which is terrific, but you have an opportunity in the about section to weave that into a narrative. And I like to write that in first person because I feel like that is much more compelling and it does not put a barrier between you and the reader.
Because you're not a nutter who talks about themselves in the third person. Francisco,
right.
I mean, it sounds so weird. Some people
Amy Blaschka thinks.
Yes, Amy has studied the art of storytelling it's like, Amy, I know you're writing this. Stop talking.
Well, and I think people just default. They think, well, this is where I put my bio, right? And that's always traditionally in a third person. So I tell them, like, look, if this is an opportunity, make it first person. Even if I'm not writing it for you, please change it so it's first person. So you are speaking to the reader, right? This is your opportunity. This is a chance to tell that. And I like writing it as a story. That's really that career story, because for a lot of folks, they have they feel like they can't string together their especially if they have non-linear paths in their careers. What is the common thread? And I help them get to that and write it in such a way that it all makes sense. And they're like, yeah, that's cool. And they can kind of stand behind that. And then the other pieces then support that. So I have that backstory, which is the bulk of it. Write a headline that also aligns with kind of who they are. It's not generic. It's not just defaulting to whatever their current role is. It also speaks about them. It also speaks about who they serve and how they do this. So people can quickly read that and go, oh, this woman or this man, this is who I need to talk to. And then I have a what I do, which is really more the descriptive copy under your experience of your current role. And again, that's going to align with all the other pieces. And then I also write them a traditional bio, because especially now, people are invited onto podcasts and people are doing other things. And if you don't already have a bio that aligns with those other pieces, you'll be scrambling. And it's nice to have this toolkit in place that you feel comfortable, you feel like it represents who you are trying to be. For many people, they come to me not just because they've been ghostwriting clients, or they'll come to me to talk about ghostwriting and we start with the career story, or separately, they just come to me because they've made a huge pivot. Especially, this is why my business on that side of my business has picked up, I think, in COVID related stuff. People are like, well, now's the time. I'm going to start a podcast, or I'm going to do this. I'm going to shift industries. I'm going to go out on my own. I've always wanted to do this and I want to do this, Amy, but I need you to help position me and help tell my story in a way that makes sense, because forever I've been in the corporate world, or I'm suddenly going to nonprofit, or I've only done startups, or now I am doing startups. So it's a lot of different reasons, but it comes down to those basics of personal branding. But it's branding, right? It's about positioning. It's about clarity. It's about putting yourself out there in such a way that makes it easy for others to understand quickly who you are and what you're about. And again, it draws others to you. And aligned with the social media ghostwriting, that content that somebody is putting out, if that is exciting someone enough to have them click back to your profile, when they get there, there'll be no surprises. They'll be like, it'll just reinforce, yes, this is somebody that, I need to work with. And that's the other part of when I help them with their backstories and with their career stories. It's, well, what do you want? That's always my first question. What do you want? And you need clarity around that. And that answer is different for everyone. But some people, they have a job, they're gainfully employed, but maybe they're trying to attract new talent to their company. Maybe they're the CEO. Maybe they need an investor. Maybe they want partners. Maybe they just want to broaden their network. Maybe they want to shift careers. It's sort of the thing. So when you have that, what do you want? It's sort of that overarching sort of, this is what I want and this is what I'm about. It's a lot easier to create those pieces that help support that goal. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels and you're missing an opportunity and you're making it harder on yourself.
And when you tell that career story, do you find that you tend to focus more on specific moments or the journey?
It's a little of both, honestly. If my client has had, and they won't realize this, but we'll be having a conversation, they may have a trigger event that happened when they were a child, something that had a great impact on them that really set them on a path in a certain thing, or help them realize something about themselves, or later in life, it could be a personal thing, it could be a professional thing. But if that is sort of that hook, if that it becomes that theme, then we will weave that throughout. The journey, though, if it's a natural progression of things that make sense, in terms of where they are and where they want to go, then we will talk about all of those things. So it's a little of both, but in that journey, there's got to be some compelling something. There's something that, if they're still on that path, well, what is it exactly? And oftentimes they won't be able to articulate it until we're talking through that. And I'll say, so is it this? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, I guess that is, or I didn't realize that about myself. So this process becomes, I've had clients, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a coach, but I've had clients say, this is like therapy, because they are talking about things that are really deeply moving to them personally. Maybe they've never talked to another human being about their sort of career journey and what they want. And, there's no judgment with me. I'm just trying to get at their truth. What is it that they want? So they're able to kind of open up and, talk to me about things. And they may not even realize it because they've been sort of on this hamster wheel of just, I have to go, 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 go. I have to achieve. And when they sort of take that moment to pause and kind of step back and, figure that out. Well, what do you want? I know you've done this in this book. What do you want? And I'll keep at it. I won't work with them until they can answer this question. And they might go, I don't know. I said, but if you did know, what would it be? And they're afraid to kind of acknowledge that. And sometimes it's so far removed from where they've been, even if they're super professional, super accomplished, they'll say, but I've always wanted to do this. And I'll say, okay, then do that. And if you want to do that, then let's help use everything else to help you this is what guides you there. So it's really cool. It's very fulfilling for me. I get to be their biggest cheerleaders because I can see the brilliance in these people. They're so so many people, I think, undervalue their gifts, because if something comes easy to us, we tend to discount it, right? We think that everybody can do this because, oh, it's no big deal. I've always done this. It comes very naturally and easily to me. And you think, no biggie. That's not what makes me different, because everybody does that, but they don't realize that. They need someone to say, no, this is kind of a big deal. This is a gift. So it's fun to go through that process and for them to see it. And finally, when they have a narrative that is written, they go, oh, okay. And they feel good, because they should feel good, but it's nice to have that piece done.
I don't know if this is an incredibly encouraging thing or depressing in some ways, is that, and I think I've heard you say something along those lines, is that how most people can't see their own story. I think you might have said they can't see their own brilliance, I think is the term you used.
Yeah.
And it's shocking because, and this is everyone, people will say, oh, because this job would suit you fine because you did this. And I'm like, what? And then you speak to a few people and they're like, oh yeah, definitely. It's this inability to, as much as we might be self-aware people, but there's inability to connect the dots in our own personal or professional story it's still baffles me about how much that is the case. And I've seen people use, you mentioned you're not a therapist or a coach, but I have actually seen a coach that uses this as one of his exercises, and he calls it branded, I think. So he does this sort of therapeutic deep dive into the person's history about their parents and all of those things, to then try and find out, one connecting thread in the story and say, okay, so you were a rebel. and all the jobs you've gone through, the you rebelling against certain things was the main thread there. So now, because the coach is coaches, so it says now you're a coach, the people you should be trying to help are rebels. And people are like,
Right.
that never occurred to me. Like, I
Isn't that
never.
funny? Yeah, yeah. So that's so true. People they don't see that. It is hardest to be most objective about yourself, right? And as much as, like you said, we can be self-aware and we can think, oh yes, I am completely tuned into who I am. Everybody needs help. Everybody needs a little help. And it's a great exercise to go through with, people who know you, who you trust, that you can just say, well, what about this? Because if you are willing to ask and to listen, and people know that they're able, they're like, do you really want to hear? Because I think so often you say you want to know something, you say you want the truth, but people don't want the truth. If you're willing to be receptive to learning about yourself, and maybe even if you don't think that's the way you are coming across and who you really are, it's very valuable to hear from others. It's like, well, this is what I'm getting from you, and this is what I think, and this is what I hear. Particularly if, like you said, like someone is making those connections and observations, like, well, you've done this and this and this. And it seems like, and that's exactly what I do with my clients, is finding that common thread, even if it has nothing to do with job title, nothing to do with industry, but there'll be something like that they're a rebel, or they love building things, or they're all about transformation, or, pick something that they're like, and once you can find that little bit, they'll go, oh, it's like this huge aha for them. It's great for them, but I'm telling you, for me, I get like, oh, good. I found that sort of hidden thing that was always right there, hidden in plain sight for them. That they just never were able to kind of articulate or put their finger on. But when somebody else outside of them is able to kind of point, like, could it be this? They're like, oh, yeah, well, I guess so. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when you can have that clarity and you can do that, it's so much easier, because then like this guy, like, yeah, that's who you should be coaching, or other rebels, right? You're able to do that, and you can focus rather than just ruminate or be, the worst thing we can try to do is be everything to everyone, right? In business, that doesn't serve anyone. It's a watered down version of you, and it doesn't help anyone. The more you can niche down and be very specific about who you are and who you help, the better. And I think people shy away from that because they feel like, well, if I get too narrow in my focus, I'm going to, miss out on business opportunities. But the inverse is true. It's very counterintuitive. But if you're like, no, these are who I work with, you'll be able to, those people will be able to find you because they know that's what you're specializing in. And the people that don't align and aren't really wanting that, they can fall away, and you can refer them to somebody else if it doesn't work. So it's really an interesting exercise. But I do think having someone other than you help you with that, like, it's good to do the self-work, but there's certainly something to be said for an outside third-party objective person who's like, this is what I'm seeing, and it's that observation and sort of, like you said, connecting the dots for them that maybe people need most.
I'm mindful of our time, so I just have one last question to you, which is, knowing that your background is storytelling through and through, even though there is that slight aggression that now makes sense in the story, because part of being a storyteller is being able to make sense of the bits that don't make. Well, oh, of course, that was just storytelling in a different way.
Master plan.
So I read a lot of your Forbes articles, right? And when you write those, you don't use what I would consider a storytelling approach to them. So you're not coming at them from a Michael Lewis side. I mean, is anyone coming at anything from Michael Lewis side? But you're not, telling the story and then getting the message out of it. You sort of capturing attention very well with the headlines and then going to straight into the message. Is there a particular reason why you use that approach for Forbes?
Well, because for that, I feel like that is what works best for Forbes. It's not set up for a narrative format. It is a business-focused audience that is in and out. And I try, every once in a while, I have more of a feature article that has a little bit more of that in there. But the way that for that medium, for that outlet, it's a little different. So it's less about a traditional narrative in storytelling and more about being an exercise in being concise and brevity and getting that point across in such a way for a business audience that is, when we say, a short attention span. This is honestly right now, there are very few people that actually take the time to read a longer form article. So it needs to be constructed in such a way that will lend itself to people actually taking the time, which is, like 3 minutes, maybe, depending on the length of it, 3 to 5 minutes. But it's amazing, So that's a very deliberate choice on my part, because that aligns with that medium. I feel like I could try to write something that's more storytelling, but because it's a business focused audience and I'm writing about leadership and career, that's the section I write for. Unless I'm writing a feature and include somebody's history in that, I probably wouldn't do it in a more traditional storytelling.
Yeah, I think the question I have with the dilemma that you're mentioning there is, the business focused audience, not that much attention span, because that's a problem that I come up all the time when I'm trying to explain to people that they should use more storytelling. But people are not going to sit down and listen, blah, blah. And the argument is always that, well, no, if you do it properly, they will sit down and listen. So I think what I would be perhaps interested in find out is I don't know how easy it is to compare these things, but if there was ever a way to compare the more tactical articles from, if there was, so I think one recent one was, I think how Tim Ferriss, the skill he values more is time management, right? I think that was one that was not that long ago. So my query would be, if you got a whole bunch of those when it's very direct and very much to the point, and you compare those to the same article, the same takeaway, but with an actual story, how much would there be any difference in how they're remembered? Are these people that don't have a chance, would they absorb it more if it was an actual story, or they just would not even bother to listen after the first 2 lines because they go, oh, no, I don't have time for this. So
yeah. Well, I will tell you this. I track all of my content in terms of its performance and engagement. So, and at least for the Forbes things, they will, if you go, every contributor has a page that has all of their articles. So I have 116, something like that. And they will have at the bottom of your top 10. And if you look at those, it will tell you very clearly, like the Tim Ferriss one, that's almost 3 or 4, whatever. The top one, it's going to include, it has other leaders that are highlighted, but it's more in that style that we were talking about that do best. And there are clear takeaways also, in almost like, it doesn't have to be a how-to necessarily, but certainly this is why this is why this leader is great at this, or Tim Ferriss. It's like and even in that Tim Ferriss article, I think there were 7 different things that in a long-time management that, so people have those clear takeaways. So it may just be on Forbes itself. I've written articles on LinkedIn and on Medium and on Thrive Global. Again, it's a very, what works on Thrive Global is a little different, right? So the audience is expecting a different sort of experience. And Medium is the same thing. It can be kind of across the board. It can be very much more that formulaic kind of business thing, or it can be an essay, a narrative, different things. So I'm a fan of storytelling. I think I would like to see more of it in business, and I like when I'm working with leaders, I say it's important because, as you know, people remember stories more. They remember that this is something that kind of resonates with them. And it's not, stories they aren't the hard sell. Stories are much more, there's a moral, there's something you learned. It ends with some value and some sort of, it's like a serve, not sell message. And that's very much like the pull strategy versus the push. People don't really want that. But I think I have to walk a fine line with the Forbes articles, just because I've seen some of the things that have been a little more narrative and telling a story. Nobody wanted to read it. So it's like, well, okay. It doesn't mean I'll never do it, but once in a while, it's kind of peppered in there. Maybe one every 5 articles will be written in that way, in a different format than the, Ferriss articles, or you have the 7 things.
Fair enough. I'm going to link on the show notes all the places that people can find you. So let me just ask that typical question in a slightly different way. where do you want people to find you? Of all the places they can find you, what's the place they should really go if they want to either speak to you or just get the most interesting or most novel stuff you're doing now?
I mean, they can go to my website. Certainly, I'm all over social media, right? LinkedIn is my primary platform. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter. But my website has a sampling of my, Forbes articles there, so you'll be able to get that. It has more about me and my story and my bio. It has about my services. It talks more about, what I do. And if they want to get in touch with me, there's an easy way to do that as well, to contact me. So that's just amyblaschka.com. And you will link to this because no one can spell my last name. So they'll be able to get to it easily that way. That's probably the best way.
Amy, thank you very much for your time today. And this is something I've seen in one of your updates. I understand you're working on a novel. I can only wish you luck because writing a book is not for the faint of heart.
Right. Yes. Well, I will. This is my promise to you: is that is very much a narrative. It's a psychological thriller, so it's way different from my Forbes articles. But I'm excited about that, and thanks for the well wishes on that. It'll take some more work.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves, and until next time. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave us a review or a rating on the Apple Podcasts app. It's very easy. You open the app and find this show. Then scroll down a little, and when you see the stars, tap. I'd really appreciate it, and it does help other people find us. And if you'd like to get in touch or find out more about what I do, reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit my website, storypowers.com.